Hello, I'm John Shaffrey, and I'm here today with Brian Kegley. We're from the law firm of Poole, Shaffrey and Kegley, and going to talk today about California employment law. Now, Brian, you make yourself available to many associations and chambers of commerce and large employers to come to them and speak about all the nuances of California employment law. And one of those areas that seems to get a lot of questions is the topic of California leaves of absences. What can you tell us?
Well, first and foremost, California is one of those states that I call the alphabet soup of leave. Whether we're talking FMLA, CFRA, PDLL, PFL, and then now we have two new leaves that are relevant in 2021 that I want to focus on today. The first is the Supplemental Paid Sick Leave Law, SPSL, for those of you who love the acronyms. The Supplemental Paid Sick Leave Law became effective on March 29, 2021. This applies to any employer that has 26 or more employees in the state of California. This is a huge expansion of the COVID-19 relief payments that are due under either federal or state law. Even small employers have to comply with this one. And under the California SPSL, every employer must provide their employees with 80 hours of paid sick leave. And this is supplemental paid sick leave. Most of you already know that under California law, you are required to provide no less than 3 paid sick days per year for your average full-time employee. So this is a new leave bank. This is for any employee who is suffering from COVID-related symptoms, who's been ordered to quarantine or self-isolate because they've been exposed to somebody with COVID-19. If they are self-quarantining because they've traveled to a dangerous or high-propensity location of COVID-19, this leave will also apply to them. And then there's also a question as to whether or not those individuals who are fearful to return to work are going to be able to use the SPSL so that they can continually be paid by the employer to stay home from work. Understanding that this supplement applies to those employees who cannot work from home, or telework as we call it. These are folks who cannot perform their essential job functions as a result of one of those COVID-related issues. And every employer must make sure that they are tracking this time on every pay stub, reporting to their employees how much remaining SPSL leave they have available. Any one of those violations, any one of those failures to provide the new SPSL leave does result in a potential for catastrophe and liability to the employer. The second area of new law for 2021 is the baby bonding leave requirements that have now been expanded to even the small employers. This is for those employers that have 5 or more employees in the state of California. You must now provide no less than 12 weeks of job protected leave so that an employee, whether male or female, can bond with a newborn child, an adopted child, or a foster child. That 12 weeks is unpaid by the employer, but you must make sure that you're preserving their job, because at the conclusion of their leave period, you must reinstate them to their prior job or a substantially similar job. Also, there can be no acts of discrimination or retaliation for someone who exercises this leave. Specifically, I'll talk about the concept of paternity leave. There's been a discriminatory practice in the past by certain businesses that don't believe that the father or the male in the relationship should be allowed to take any leave during the time period that a baby comes home or a newly adopted or fostered child comes into the household. If there are any discriminatory acts that arise from this new bill, penalties, attorney's fees, and costs will be attached to those circumstances.
Brian, what would you say would be the biggest mistake or mistakes that our employers are making when an employee asks to take a leave?
Well, first and foremost, documentation is key whenever we're talking about any of the leave law areas. If you are not taking all of the affirmative steps to make sure that every conversation, every email is printed out and dropped into the employee's file, you're doing yourself a disservice. Because under California law specifically, an employer has an affirmative duty to enter into what we know as the interactive process. The interactive process is the engagement back and forth between the employee and the employer to determine what is and is not a reasonable accommodation for the employee's request for leave. In many circumstances, an employer has this duty to interact with the employee even if they fall below the thresholds of any of the major leave laws. For instance, under federal law, the Family Medical Leave Act only applies to those with 50 or more employees. But California law, the FEHA, Fair Employment and Housing Act, applies to those that have 5 or more. And it is the FEHA that requires an employer to engage in the interactive process with their employees. So even if you're a small organization, even if you have only 5 employees, you have this obligation to interact, to engage with your employees. And that engagement must be documented. At the beginning, when the employee tells you that they are in need of taking a leave of absence, during the middle part, to check in, to confirm what the benefits are that you as the employer are providing to the employee, and then at the end, shortly before the employee is scheduled to return to work, asking them to bring in a fitness for duty certification, proof that they are able to return to their job safely, competently, and effectively. Those communications must be in writing and are really key to making sure that every employer does things right.
What is the risk to the employer for failing to comply with all these new laws?
Well, under the Fair Employment and Housing Act, claims of discrimination, retaliation, harassment, failure to engage in the interactive process, that's its own claim in California. And finally, failure to provide a reasonable accommodation. The FEHA provides not just for damages and penalty pay, but it also provides for the recovery of attorney's fees for a plaintiff. And this is many times what starts and motivates these lawsuits to take place, because the attorney's fees become very, very expensive. And under California law, if an employer is found liable and even $1 of payment is ordered to the plaintiff, they recover all of their attorney's fees. That means that an attorney's fees award of $300,000, $400,000, or even $500,000 can be tacked on top of any award. So this is a huge area that employers have to be very careful about because it carries with it a tremendous amount of exposure.
If you would like more information and keep updated on these new laws as they happen, such as the new mandatory COVID Pay Leave Act, come to the website for the law firm of Poole Shafrey & Kegley, pooleshafrey.com, and sign up for our free monthly newsletter, the California Sidebar, which also includes special news alerts when there are new laws that are happening. Thank you for watching.